Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swiz, here to talk all things round 22, and there's one big thing to talk about, and that is Paddy Cripps. Before we get into that, as always, thank you for all people who subscribe, like, listen to our show. We really appreciate the support. In particular, our sponsors as well, Splash Vodka, Earn You, Manscaped. Never a better time to sign up and support them who support us. Splash Vodka, great idea to sit there and watch the footy this weekend and enjoy a nice beverage. Gamble responsibly, but get there, sign up to Earn You and try to make yourself some money. And Manscaped, some great products there. You can get that discount and free delivery. Well, last night, and we sat there and we recorded 2 podcasts hoping that the Cripps decision would be done. And even after that, still had time to watch the Storm dominate Penrith and went to bed, and still we had no idea what was happening with Paddy Cripps. There was a lot of discussion by the lawyers, and in the end, a lot of us woke up to the news this morning that Paddy Cripps is off. Depending on how you feel, and there's a lot of us who have mixed opinions about that. From a Supercoach perspective, a lot of people will be wrapped. There'll be some people who won't be, who had the spare trades or the loophole cover to go. But from my perspective, just from a Supercoach perspective, I'm wrapped because, I was trying to hope that Mitchie Owens would have to go out and go bang tonight. From a footy perspective, don't really agree with it. I think the onus should be on the player. I'm happy for players to bump, tackle, do whatever they want. But if a player was to come off injured there, well, that's on the offending player. I don't like the argument then, that player can't take a punch or can't take a hit, and it becomes on the defending player. I know not everyone agrees with that. I know my mate Benny there, and being a Brisbane supporter, you'd think he'd be a bit more supportive for Archie, but he's not. He didn't think there should have been anything in it. And that's just the way footy is with trying to cater for everybody. You cater with everybody's different opinions. So we have plenty of people out there who think, you can go out and still should be able to bump. You might have the people who are the extreme where they think, king hits and whatever should be allowed and that, and should just be a free-for-all. You've got other people out there who think, tackling should be banned and it should be like touch, and then, 99% of us in between having that different opinion. So nobody's ever going to agree with these things, and that's, I guess, in a way what makes footy great, but another way, it makes it confusing and really hard because it's just not black and white. It's such a hard game where just to adjudicate, where it there's no 2 incidents usually the same. So how do you make it black and white? It gets frustrating with other players. Like I know a few people brought up the Pickett incident from a couple of weeks ago where I think he got a week, and it does seem that certain players do get treated differently. I've always also prescribed to the idea that it should be Cripps doesn't miss the next 2 weeks against Melbourne and Collingwood, but he should miss the next 2 weeks against Brisbane. And that should be just home and away. I think that's where you'd have these decisions where people are like, oh my God, it's an important game. And I think the AFL does get a little biased with that they want their best players out there for these important matches. And, there's definitely, you think there's sometimes a lenience against suspending players like that because they want, the importance of the game. They've got a lot of money with the TV rights and they want people tuning in. And so that does make things interesting. And we've had these discussions before, Trent Cotchin leading into that prelim. There's been plenty of examples where players should have got suspended in other top periods of the year. And if you think this was probably round 1 or 2, he probably goes for 2 weeks and there's no argument. So it does open up a lot of inconsistencies where, I think stuff like this needs to be ironed out, and maybe it does need to be that system where we talked about of Tom Stewart on Voss on Prestia, where what's also the compensation now. Say Brisbane now missing Archie for the rest of that game. Richmond missed Prestia for that game. You can open up plenty of examples of that, and should it be just against the other player? Maybe it should just be fines, but then the problem is the players and the player association don't agree with large fines. Like, to make them worthwhile, it'd have to be a significant percentage of their earnings. So let's hypothetically say Cripps might be on $1 million. You make it 250, 300,000. Well, they're going to be thinking twice about that. But then there's no way the players are going to agree with that. So yeah, how you actually come up with a solution, and once again, people are going to have different views on that. So it's an interesting one, but from a Supercoach perspective, the 19% of people the 19% of trades this week, which have seen Cripps traded out, you can reverse those trades and get him back in. The only one I'd suggest, if you had the 170,000 go Cripps to Laird, you might want to keep that one, because Laird is the obvious VC option if you have him. Laird into Oliver is what I'm doing. I know my mate Ben from the A-League chat, he was sitting there going, do I go Cripps or Himmelberg, maybe to Laird? And I'm like, yep, Himmelberg definitely there. You just need kind of Laird in this matchup, and he's been absolutely flying. He's been the number one Supercoach player for about the last 5 weeks, 10 weeks. We had a discussion last night of how do you start Laird next year. They're probably going to have a soft fixture to start the Crows, always the case for the bottom 6 teams. And he's going to be priced probably 700 if not more, depending on how he finishes these last 2 matches. So that's an interesting one, an interesting discussion for our pre-season. But yeah, you got to kind of get him in. If you don't have him, probably the obvious one then is Neil VC tonight. Probably we think he's going to go about that 120 to 130, so he'll be a pretty safe choice. But there you just kind of run the risk of missing, 20, 25 points for those who are going to have Laird, or might be able to do something with Oliver or even Mills this week against the Pies midfield. Pies are a very good team at the moment, but they don't score many Supercoach points. So some of those Swannies players should go pretty well this week. The other one is Vlosten is named to play. So I've got him there, but I've swung Himmelberg back. So if Himmelberg goes really well, then it'll be just a case of Vlosten will be benched. I'm not going to run the risk of him being laid out or injured. So you need to have cover if you're one of the people like myself or Supercoach Mama out there who have Vlosten in. I think it's about 6% of teams. So yeah, I still think he probably does play, because the Tigers can sew up their final spot if they beat the Hawks. Don't want to leave it to the last week, but yeah, he's obviously going to be playing hurt. I think he's wearing a rib guard. There's some news about Nan Curvis as well. Left training early, so there's a few people that have him. Definitely something to consider if you've got cover. Teakle's not playing this week, so if you've got, say, a Darcy Cameron, somebody like that, you can put on at at R3. You might want to do that this week, just because in case he's a little late out. The other one is some of the Collingwood players have come down ill, so just be monitoring that as they lead into their game. There could be a couple of late changes like that. And then also Geelong love their late changes, so Mitchy Duncan's already out. So unfortunately those people have got him. You kind of, in a perfect world, can hold him. You will, because they play West Coast next week. And I'm probably against now bringing in some of those Cats players, because they're probably going to play the Thursday night the Thursday night qualifying final. Which means even with the week gap, it'll probably end up being only like a 12-day break. So some of the Cats could get rested for that West Coast game, especially if they're playing for nothing, bar percentage, which means nothing to them anyway. I feel like it's just a case of Cameron and Hawkins trying to get the Coleman in that last round. In regards to anything else that you probably can be doing in your sides, if you've still got Hewitt, Brayshaw might be a good pickup there. The obvious ones is Stewart and Sicily if you don't have them, but yeah, Brayshaw has been flying in that midfield and probably then gives you some options, especially if you've got Hewitt playing in at M9. Like a few people have loopholed him there. They might have a rookie defensive midfielder where you could possibly then move Short onto your bench either line. So that might be a good move. If you've got Short and you've got a spare trades, then he might be another one. I know Chrissy's been trying to sell Luke Ryan stocks, but knowing that, this will probably be the week he'll have his down week, but he has been flying. So there is a few good options. And the other one is, as we discussed last week, look out for these retirement players. Now, Josh Kennedy, that was just a freak of a performance. Kicking the 8, should have probably kicked 10. But, they just kind of feed players in these games, especially when the opposition's not playing for much. Like, Adelaide was still trying to win that game, but kind of was a little bit like West Coast are kicking the ball to Kennedy every time. And you're going to get that in sort of these games. Next week, McAvoy playing his last match. You've got Robbie Gray. Robbie Gray, an absolute champion of footy. He's probably been a bit underrated. But yeah, definitely somebody that maybe if you've got that spare trade next week, and you make your Supercoach grand final, you might want to just fling him in, because you could see him just going out with a bang. So there's some options there to consider with and have a look at that. Josh Kennedy from Sydney, but that I think they're going to be playing finals, so I'm sure Longmire's going to be trying to get him in, so he won't be playing a last match there. But you never know, he might be trying to, if he gets himself in and right, he'll prove himself. So possibly there. So, and the other one is the draft finals. I know there's a few playing draft grand finals this week, or you might be in draft prelims. Have a look at those waiver wires. Adelaide forwards. A lot of people try to stream forwards, F4, F5. So you might have to pick up like a Lockie Murphy type, or a Thilthorpe or somebody like that who could go off this week. I picked up Jaden Stephenson in one, who I can't believe he didn't get dropped. Twice turned his back on the footy, and that absolute blunder which led to a buddy goal was absolutely comical. But he's been absolutely flying from a Supercoach perspective. So you might find somebody like that. Keeper leagues, if it's open slather where people can still pick up players, you might have people trying to win this week and win their grand finals, so they might be dropping rookie players to bring in sort of more senior guys to win. Or you might even able to get a trade for somebody like that who, this is their chance to win, and you might able, find a way to get a rookie out of their side. So feel free to send some of those, even if you want to ask us, and send prospective trades that you might have and get that done. I know there's a couple of people that have been doing that. A shout out to Steve as well. He was listening to both podcasts this morning from that we put out last night. He had a question about bringing in Rowan Marshall. Not as keen about trading out Darcy for Marshall, but at the same time, I don't mind it because he's opening up his forward ruck loophole options there. So, and the way Darcy's been playing compared to Marshall, I can see that has been a good matchup. Just some advice going into that prelim weekend. Just have a look at your matchups, as we said last week. If you can hold your trade as late as possible, and if you look like you're going to win, well, that's fine, then you can hold it. If you look like you're going to lose, you might want to do a left field move there, try to get maybe a Merritt, Darcy Parish, Redmond, so Essendon playing Port. There might be some moves you can make there, especially with the Richmond playing 320 and the Bombers playing after that, short to Redmond if you've got some cash. So there could be a couple moves there you might be able to make late if you've got trades up your sleeve that might be able to get you the win and get you into that grand final. Outside of that, as we always say, continue to get in touch with us. We did a great podcast last night, our first one for Premier League. Particularly Chris and I are very big into our Premier League, me being a City supporter and Chris being a Liverpool supporter. So I think there's about 8 million people around the world involved in English Premier League fantasy, which probably is slightly a bit bigger than the 160,000 for Supercoach. So definitely an interesting discussion. It was a bit refreshing to talk something different. There's plenty of other fantasy competitions coming up, as I've said, involved in NFL, but Big Bash, Supercoach Racing, and the women's AFL fantasy. So hopefully there's going to be some release of player prices and details for that. I believe the Essendon Hawthorn game's already been sold out at Port Melbourne, and they're going to move that to hopefully to Marvel. So there is a lot of interest in that. So there's plenty of fantasy going around. Draft Stars, what we play weekly. Again, Adelaide North Melbourne players, Fremantle forwards are good to look at that. So there's plenty of fantasy options and discussion to have, and so feel free to contact us and we can have a discussion about that. But all the best in your Supercoach prelim finals for who are there, and those up the top, our man Abdul in third place and also Jay in first. We wish you guys all the best, and hopefully you guys can be 1 and 2 coming into the last week and have a bit of a discussion around that. So all the best, and we'll talk soon. Bye.